This has been an interesting week for the world. The Ukraine crisis is still underway, and we've seen how French President Emmanuel Macron has been in Moscow to talk to the Russian President Vladimir Putin about finding a possible solution to the crisis. And then here at home in India, Lata Mangeshkar passed away. Now, we've been listening to a lot of her music, but before you ask me, dear viewer, why I'm talking about Lata Mangeshkar and what this has to do with India's foreign policy, let me just say here that she was really a one-woman army who led India's soft power abroad, not just in India's neighborhood, but all over the world. She sang in several languages. But I will come to that in a minute. And before I speak about both these issues, I'd like to make an appeal to you, dear viewer. Please do subscribe to ThePrint. Click on the join button, pay rupees 159. It's not very much money at all, but as a subscriber, you get access to benefits and privileges that non-subscribers don't have. You've been of great help to us, of great support to ThePrint these last several months of the pandemic. So do continue to support us, because it's on the basis of your subscription that videos like this, that journalists like me and elsewhere in ThePrint can do the kind of work that we do. So I hope you will click on the join button, pay a little bit, pay rupees 159, and get access to ThePrint's free, fair, objective, and unhyphenated journalism. Now, back to my column Global Print on ThePrint's website, in which I talk about these two issues. And let me start with Lata Mangeshkar. We've heard her music. She's delighted us these past several decades. And on the day she passed on, shall I say, all day long, there was all the TV channels and all the social media. We were just listening over and over again to a lot of the music that she sang across these several years. And what was fascinating was that she got the kind of respect and the adulation that world leaders get. The Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan tweeted that she was one of the truly great singers. Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who doesn't have a Twitter account, but she sent a message of condolence. In fact, there were pictures of Lata Mangeshkar as a younger Lata Mangeshkar traveling to Bangladesh just after the 1971 war, when Bangladesh became a free country, and pictures of her and Sheikh Hasina's father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and his wife. Lots of lovely pictures in black and white on the internet, which I hope you will see. And there was Hamid Karzai, the former president of Afghanistan, saying that her voice filled millions of hearts with joy. But not just leaders. What was so interesting about some of the tributes that were paid to her is that they came from ordinary South Asians. And let me give you a couple of examples. There is Sabir Ibrahimi, a young Afghan who said that during the civil war in Afghanistan in the 90s, when they would hear Lata Mangeshkar and Muhammad Rafi's music, and he says, it kept my family going. As a kid, I couldn't tell which one was Hindu and which one was Muslim. Then there is Atiya K. Rana, a Pakistani-American woman, who says that Lata Mangeshkar brought her family so much joy. She said, Abu, a village man, and Ammi, a very city girl. And it was on Lata Mangeshkar's music and her songs that they fell in love and got married for many happy years. And both of them, and she says, and Atiya Rana says, please continue to soothe those souls up there with your melodies. And Sanjeev Satgenya, the editor of the Kathmandu Post in Nepal, noted, Ye zameen chup hai, Asmaan chup hai. So Lata Mangeshkar, a one-woman army that could lead India's soft power abroad, and did so successfully without being asked for it. It's not as if the Indian Ministry of External Affairs called her one day in Mumbai and said, Lata ji, can you please become this sort of mascot or be emblematic of India's soft power. She did it on her own. The Hindi film industry is this amazing vehicle for India's soft power. And I will argue that actually the Indian government doesn't understand that enough. That Bollywood does what it wants to do. And of course, the Indian government sort of, pushes some films abroad, occasionally does a film festival here and there. It's so shabbily done anyway. But Lata Mangeshkar and Hindi film music, the Indian arts actually, should be pursued as a extension of India's power all over the world. And I will come to that a bit later, but let me come back to the Ukraine crisis. And this past week, we saw how the Russian President Vladimir Putin was in China to attend the opening of the Beijing Olympics, the inaugural ceremony. And again, I come back to soft power. That was a manifestation of China's soft power. So if you saw that, dear viewer, it was a spectacular opening. Now, you know that India, like several other Western nations, the US, Denmark, Japan, the UK, boycotted the inaugural ceremony. Of course, the Indians only sent one single man to the Olympics. He's the only person who qualified to go, Arif Khan from Jammu and Kashmir. But a lot of the other countries, the Americans, for example, realizing that they could not boycott the Olympics because their sportsmen and women had been waiting for 4 years to participate in the greatest sports show on earth. So what they did is that they did this sort of halfway measure, diplomatically boycotted it, the opening ceremony, but their sports people have participated and have been winning several medals in these past few days. But Vladimir Putin was there at the inaugural, and so was Imran Khan, the Pakistan Prime Minister. In fact, Imran Khan also met Xi Jinping during his 4-day visit to China. They call themselves Iron Brothers, and they have this phrase that describes the relationship, which is higher than the mountains, deeper than the seas, and a relationship which is sweeter than honey. So these two Iron Brothers, Pakistan and China, and you will see that how they're becoming closer and closer. China, the patron, Pakistan, the client. And one of the agreements that they signed was to deepen the CPEC, or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. According to China's ambassador in Pakistan, about $25 billion have been spent already by the Chinese on CPEC. And now they are intending to push this project much further. So that begs the question. India, which is the biggest country in South Asia, is allowing outside nations, outsiders like China, to come inside and to deepen the bonds of cooperation between these South Asian neighbors and China. Now, you may well say that the China-Pakistan relationship goes back decades and this is nothing new. And you would be absolutely right when you said that. All I'm saying is that I think India has to be much more careful. The fact that India and Pakistan don't have a conversation at all and haven't had for the last several years, and especially since 2019, since the Balakot airstrikes, demonstrates to you that the Pakistanis a shrinking economy, a weak power in many ways, is looking outside to a great power to balance India, and that great power and that big power is China. So Xi Jinping, whose troops are sitting on the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, doesn't mind. In fact, he welcomes the fact there is a country inside South Asia, namely Pakistan, which wants to balance India, because that's exactly what Xi Jinping also wants to do. But the more interesting equation in this story is the fact that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping's China are coming closer and closer together. And this strategic partnership between Russia and China is one that India is watching not just carefully, but also warily. I have said in the past, in my past columns on Global Print, on the Print's website, that the Russian and the Chinese leaderships, as well as the peoples, are coming closer and closer together. And one of the ways in which this has been demonstrated is, of course, the Chinese support for Russia on the Ukraine crisis. But I have also argued that this is a very unequal partnership, a very unequal strategic relationship, if you like. And that I'm not very sure whether the Russians are completely in favor of it. In fact, I'm not even sure whether Vladimir Putin, the president, is terribly in favor of this sort of embrace with China. But sometimes he wonders perhaps he doesn't have any options, because right now if he's arguing with the West, led by the US on a daily basis over the Ukraine crisis, for example, then what other space does he have left? But what do countries like India do? Now, India and Russia are old strategic partners. India depends a lot on the Russians for its military armament. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? On the one hand, you have Russia and China in a strategic tie, in a strategic bond. But on the other hand, it's Russian defense equipment that is supporting Indian soldiers fight against the Chinese, if it comes to that. Now, you know that one of the reasons why India boycotted the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in China, along with the US, Japan, etc., and the other countries, UK as well, is because one of the 1,200 torchbearers of the Olympic flame, who was part of the clash between Indian soldiers and Chinese soldiers in the Galwan Valley in June 2020, in which 20 Indian soldiers very unfortunately lost their lives. Now, the Chinese are basically stabbing you in the eye, poking you in the eye and saying, look, we are going to honor our own soldiers, whether you like it or not. So that's clearly an affront to the Indian establishment, and there's no way that India can tolerate this affront by then sending its diplomats, which would mean a recognition of what the Chinese are doing. But I think what the Chinese did was very insensitive. I mean, the Chinese are very big on saving face. You know, they don't like it when others snub them publicly or humiliate them publicly. So similarly, they should understand that a fellow Asian power, India, also doesn't like that. But if you are to use one of the Galwan Valley soldiers to be an Olympic torchbearer, then I'm afraid that the Indian government is going to react the way it does. And what is even more interesting is that this Chinese snub, comes in the wake of not very long ago when the Russian, Indian and Chinese foreign ministers came together virtually on a virtual platform. That is Wang Yi of China, Sergei Lavrov of Russia and India's as Jaishankar came together. And that in itself was this gesture on the part of the Indian government that, yes, we are willing to talk about the issues that divide us. But soon after that, you have this Olympic torchbearer who is a Galwan Valley soldier who participated in this clash with Indian troops. Now, that's being, like I said earlier, very insensitive on the part of the Chinese. So what does India make of the Russia-China embrace? What does India make of what Putin and Xi Jinping are doing together? Remember that Prime Minister Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin had a very good meeting in early December when Putin came to India, only his second visit abroad since the pandemic. And in fact, in some ways, if India is shifting back towards the Russians and a little bit away from the US, then that is one of the reasons, is that the Indian government realizes that Russia still has a big role to play in international affairs, which is why the Indian government has kept very quiet on the Ukraine crisis. But I think that the Russians must also understand that New Delhi would be deeply discomfited by a growing partnership between China and Russia. Now, be that as it may, right now the Ukraine crisis is on top of everyone's mind. It's concentrating the energies of the Western Bloc, as well as, of course, of the Chinese. The Russians are the primary player. India, like I said earlier, is watching and waiting very close to see which way the winds are going to blow, and they hope that they're going to blow over on this crisis. The last thing that I want to say on this video this week is that I'm sure some of you watched the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympic Games. It was quite spectacular, dear viewer. You had this sort of technological display of color, of light, of the way the whole thing was choreographed. It was quite brilliant, and that I'd like to say to you is a manifestation of China's soft power. So China, on the one hand, is the world's second largest economy. It has a huge military-industrial complex, which is a manifestation of China's hard power. But here I would like to point out that I wish that India, which is a middling country, aspiring to be a regional power, should exercise its soft power much more than it does already. Now, obviously, Lata Mangeshkar's music is not going to fight Chinese soldiers in the line of actual control. But why should India not do both? Why should it not have troops that are combat ready on the LAC, potentially there to ward off the Chinese and use its soft power, like Lata Mangeshkar's music, like the Hindi film industry, like the film industries in Kolkata, in Chennai, all over the country, and use it as weapons of India's influence. I'm going to leave it there, dear viewer, but I'd like to hear what you think about my column Global Print as well as this video. Look forward to your comments.